Welcome to a community education presentation by the Guam Citizens for Public Accountability. I'm Ken Leon-Guerrero. I'm your host and spokesperson. Today we're going to talk about what makes a life worth living. If you ask 100 people that question, you'll get 100 answers. But when you look at the answers closely, you'll see that most of them fall into one of three categories. Most people will say they want to spend more quality time with family and friends. Most people say they want a job that gives meaning and purpose to their lives. And just about everybody says they want to be able to pay their bills. Outside of those three things, every generation defines what other things make life worth living. Take these people. Yeah, the baby boomers. I'm one of them. And in our minds, we still look like this, even though the reality is we kind of look like this. Our mantra was make love, not war. And following that mantra, we created some of the most incredible music the world has ever heard. A lot of it is still playing on radio stations today. We even put a man on the moon. And these are our children. Generation X. They're a little different from baby boomers. They're a little more materialistic, and following the example of the material girl herself, they are the generation that gave us the McMansion and $4 cup of coffee. Their motto, he who dies with the most toys wins. Their children are the millennials, these guys. Now, the millennials seem to have been born with a smartphone in their hand. You never see them without their smartphones. And even though baby boomers have smartphones, millennials actually know how to use smartphones. And there's another difference. Millennials are the largest generation. They knocked the baby boomers off our pedestal. Millennials are also better educated than baby boomers were. Millennials also had more buying power than we had when we were their age. And millennials are more socially progressive. In fact, they're kind of like baby boomers in that sense, because they are the ones that gave us the Occupy Wall Street movement. Their cousins in the Middle East are the ones that gave us the Arab Spring. So when we look at those things, we can see that millennials are a little bit different. And that goes back to their motto, YOLO, you only live once. So with that in mind, it explains why millennials are more interested in experiences like rock climbing. Baby boomers are into rockers. Here's a baby boomer car. Here's a millennial car. Here's a baby boomer house. Here's a millennial house. Here's a group of baby boomers on their way to an event that defined our generation, Woodstock. And here's a group of millennials on their way to Burning Man. Well, maybe we're not so different after all. But the one area we are different is when it comes to control of the future, because the future is a numbers game. And the people that show up set the agenda. What am I talking about? Well, in order to do that, we're going to have to look at some numbers. If we go back to the 2014 general election, we saw that there were 112,202 people eligible to vote in that election. Out of that number, only 49,110 registered to vote. It's about 44%. And out of the number who registered to vote, only 21,553 actually voted, about 44%. So 19% of us set the future priorities for 100% of us. So if you're in a room of 5 people, chances are only one person in that room voted, and the other 4 people have to live with that decision. I don't know if you're happy with that. I certainly am not. That's why we're preparing this video. Because when we look at the breakdown by age, this story doesn't get any better. When we look at those 45 and under eligible to vote, only 57% of those eligible to vote actually registered. I wish I could say baby boomers were better, but we weren't. When it comes to registering, only 43% of those eligible to vote registered to vote. Then we come to the election itself, and that's where the numbers change significantly, because for those 45 and under, only 40% of those who registered to vote actually voted. And for the baby boomers, 60% of us who registered to vote voted. Yeah, these guys. So, what does this mean? What is the significance of this focus on who shows up? We have to look no further than what happened in Great Britain this past summer. This June, there was a referendum. Is Great Britain going to stay in the European Union or leave the European Union? There were 38 million people eligible to vote, and all of the polls showed that the chances were very strong that Great Britain would stay in the European Union. On the day after the vote, there was a shock that was felt around the world. 52% of those who voted to leave the European Union. 48% of those who voted to stay. 4% made the difference. So let's look at how that 4% made a difference. When we look at the millennials and young adults 45 and under, they were 60% of the eligible vote. And they were the ones that wanted to stay in the Union, because staying in the European Union meant they could travel to all the member countries without a passport or a visa. They could live in any country they wanted to. They could work in any country they wanted to. Then there were the 46 and up group, the baby boomers, who are already set in their ways. Their kids are gone. They own their home. Most of them are in retirement. And they didn't like seeing tax dollars leave Britain to pay for projects in Europe. Kind of like the way, tax dollars from Virginia find their way to Guam. But they only made up a minority of the vote. So what happened? When the vote was analyzed, they found out that only 64% of those who registered to vote, 45 and under, actually voted. And the baby boomers, 90% of those who registered to vote voted. And as a result, the decision was made, Great Britain is leaving the European Union. And the people that are suffering the most from that decision are the millennials. But they only have themselves to blame because they didn't show up and vote. So now, young people in Europe are not going to be able to travel across Europe without passports or visas. They're not going to be able to live in any country they want to live in. They're not going to be able to work in any country they want to work in. So, how does that affect us here on Guam when we talk about a life worth living? Well, my hope is that our Guam millennials learn the lessons from their British cousins, because by 2030, millennials will make up 75% of the workforce. Millennials are going to be paying the bills for all the debt that the baby boomers are piling on your backs right now in the legislature. Hello, it's Friday, and once again we're here on the Candid News Group. I'm Ken Leon-Guerrero, and this is my point of view. I had a totally different show ready to go for you, and this is what it would have looked like. Yeah, as you can see right here, I had a whole different show all around Guam Memorial Hospital and the situation out at Eagles Field. But then something happened this past weekend. I went to Epau Beach in the Labor Day Festival, and I spent 4.5 hours talking to our younger people. Over the course of 4.5 hours, I probably talked to somewhere between 35 and 45 younger people. And I learned some things that raised my concern and why I used the video clip from 2016 talking about generations. Because one of the things I learned was that our younger people are not happy. And younger people who are not happy have a tendency to make things happen. And whether they're the things that we baby boomers would appreciate remains to be seen. Because one of the things that we know that in talking with these people, almost all the young people I talk to are so financially stressed that they're either living at home in a multi-generational house with relatives, or they're sharing a house or an apartment with friends. And the problem with that type of a living situation is that younger people who are still living at home or sharing a home with friends have a tendency to marry later and put off having children later. And that is not necessarily the best thing for our island. So what we're looking at here right now is, in the conversations I had with these people, there were three things that came apparently. The first was a lot of our people who are not, let's put it this way, let's go to shoulder. Yeah. Most of our people in the younger age are in the process of, without exception, every younger person I talk to is either planning on leaving or thinking about leaving, or they are actively in the process of making plans to leave, or they are actively leaving. Now, what do I mean by that? Those who are thinking about leaving are making, they're coming to grips in their mind that they are going to have to leave Guam if they're going to have a quality of life, because they don't see having a quality life here on Guam. Those who are planning on leaving or actively leaving, let's say actively leaving. I met one young person who liquidated all of his assets, he sold all of his stuff, sold his car, and is in the process of getting ready to relocate to the mainland following his brother. And almost every single one I talk to has a sibling or a cousin or a very close friend that has already made the trip to the mainland, and they are working together to bring this young person out. There are three reasons why our younger people are looking to leave. The first reason is quality of work life. What we're looking at right here is those 45 and under are what I refer to as a poverty generation. The people 45 and under, for the most part, are trapped in low-wage service sector jobs that don't give a lot of security, don't have a lot of upward mobility, and many of them do not pay enough money for them to continue to live here on Guam. And as a result, they're listening to their friends, cousins, siblings in the mainland and comparing the differences between their life over there and the life they have here on Guam. And the stories they shared with me, there's a huge difference. The second reason why so many of our younger people are thinking about leaving is the lack of affordable housing. Almost all the people I talk with do not believe that they will be able to afford a home here on Guam unless one of two things happens. One, they inherit it, or two, there is a huge economic collapse that's going to force the government to come in and build more affordable homes. I think the chances of either one are slight, but the whole point is that we no longer have affordable homes. When I was first left home and I was working at a minimum wage job, Working a minimum wage job back in the mid-70s, I was able to afford a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment and the payments on a new car and my living expenses on one job. Many of the younger people I talked here today, the only way they're getting by is they're in share situations or living at home, or they have multiple income streams from several jobs or a combination of one or the other. Maybe they're living at home and have 3 jobs, 2 jobs, or they're living with friends, have 2 or 3 jobs. There is a program taking place in Hawaii, and I like to use Hawaii as our canary in the coal mine for us here on Guam, because eventually everything that happens in Hawaii eventually happens to us here on Guam. And for those of you who have been following me for years, you know that in Hawaii, a family of 4 with an income of almost of $96,000 qualifies for housing assistance. Things are that bad. So what they did in Hawaii is they put together a program to identify the challenges that people in Hawaii face. It's called the ALICE program, Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. These are the working poor. These are people who make money but not enough money to continue to live in Hawaii. They make enough money that they don't qualify for a lot of support programs, but they don't make enough money to be able to live on the island of Hawaii, in the state of Hawaii, without those programs. And when we look at the breakdown by category, and you can go on to Aloha United Way Hawaii ALICE and look at the full report. And you see the breakdowns are very similar to the breakdowns here on Guam. In Hawaii, in 2015, when this report was created, about 30% of the families in Hawaii could not afford to live in Hawaii because the cost of living had gotten so high, and the incomes did not match increases in the cost of living, pretty much like we're seeing here in Guam. And the largest group of people that are suffering from this twin inflation and the cost of living and the spike in housing prices and lack of affordable housing, if you go to the bottom, it is single or cohabiting. That is where we are here on Guam. Go ahead to shoulder. So there is more to life than living to work, but the problem our younger people have is they are spending so much time working to live that they are not living. You know, when you're spending 12 to 16 hours a day on the job, you hardly have any time to spend with your children, if you have children. Let's go to clip number 1.
And this question actually comes from the audience to you, Nani, and it says, how does this affect local folks psychologically?
Well, you know, my heart is torn, honestly, listening to a lot of what Norm is saying, listening to the question before that one you just asked. Because, you know, I've actually come to a place, born and raised here, only lived in Hawaii my whole life. I've never lived anywhere else. Part Hawaiian. But I've kind of come to a place in the last couple of years where I've accepted that I might not stay here forever. My daughter might not make Hawaii her home. And that's okay. You know, before that, I would have never considered it. And I've made some pretty big decisions based on thinking I will be here forever. But, you know, working in the environment I've worked in, seeing what I've seen what hasn't happened yet, I kind of have come to terms with it's not the Hawaii I grew up in. Not to say it's better or worse, it's just different. And as it has changed with different kinds of development, with different kinds of job economics at play, and where we're putting our money in terms of workforce development and where we're not, what the education system looks like, what the opportunities are like, especially because I have a child, I'm thinking maybe I won't be here forever. So, you know, psychologically for me, I mean, day to day, week to week, I might stress out about finances, sure. But in the bigger picture, I've had to really shift my sense of, is Hawaii my forever home, or will I have to find somewhere else that I can have a better quality of life and not experience the same maybe financial hardships and challenges, actually get ahead.
And that makes me really sad.
That's very
I mean, when you think about the talent that she has, and we've lost a lot of talent, to the continental U.S. because people just don't want to make the sacrifices, that they have to make to stay here. And so I think, we're going to see a lot more of that if we don't turn the tide and actually provide a livable, kind of life here that people can afford.
Like I said, what happens in Hawaii eventually happens here on Guam. And over the past 4 years, I've documented hundreds of our younger people, skilled people, talented people who grew frustrated at living here on Guam. And I refer to them as, in addition to being financially hammered, they're also afraid. They're afraid that they won't have a job or be able to find a job that supports a middle-class lifestyle. They're afraid they will never be able to afford their own home, and they're afraid they'll never be able to retire comfortably if they stay here. That is a challenge that we, as the senior generation, the baby boomers, need to take into consideration, because our goal is to create a climate here on this island that keeps more of our young people here. Because when they leave, that's Exodus 1. And we've already lost thousands of them already. It's being reflected in our population count. It's also going to be reflected in the school enrollment count. And yet what we're seeing here is, even with all these talented people leaving, businesses closing, school enrollment shrinking, we are not seeing corresponding reductions in the expenditures of the government to take into account the shrinking tax base, the shrinking student body. That needs to be addressed, and needs to be addressed soon, because we can't keep spending money like we have a population of 180,000 when we actually have a population of 150,000. We can't keep spending money at $1 billion a year on an economy that's in trouble, because what that's doing, it's driving more and more of our younger people away. Even the people I talked to that had government of Guam jobs, they weren't happy because these weren't their dream jobs. These were the jobs that helped them get through where they are in their lives right now. And that's a big concern. Now, this is a topic I've been talking about for years. I talked about it in 2016, 17, 18. Here's a letter to the editor in 2019. It's the same thing. So my message to our voters: we need everybody who's registered to vote to go vote. Right now, we have 58,000 registered voters. That's up from 49,000 just a year ago. So we've got a large body of voters, but we can't let a low voter turnout happen again like we saw in this primary election, because this election is going to set the direction our island is heading for the next 4 years. And it's important that as many people who are going to be affected by these decisions get out there and vote and make sure that your voice is heard. Because as we saw happen in England, when younger people didn't go out and vote, the 45 and up crowd voted them out of being able to travel without a passport, being able to live and work in any country they wanted to. And we also saw the Great Britain economy collapse as all the European companies pulled their headquarters out of London because they wanted to do business on the continent. We're at a crossroads here on our island. There are many, many problems facing us right now. And unfortunately, the bulk of the cost of fixing those problems is going to fall on the backs of the younger voters. because the older voters like me, we're secure, we have our homes, we have our retirements. It's not going to affect us to the degree it's going to affect someone in their 30s, their 40s, who is just trying to get started in their professional careers, getting started building a family. They would like to have a job that matters. They would like to be able to afford a home, and if they can't find a job that gives them a middle-class quality life or better, and they can't afford a home here, they're going to join the thousands of young people who have already left our island and moved to the mainland. And unfortunately, those thousands of children are now being followed by the Exodus Wave 2, which is the grandparents, who are liquidating assets and taking their money, moving to the mainland so they can be closer to their children and grandchildren. Both Exodus waves make things harder for those that stay behind because the tax base gets smaller, a lot of assets and resources get moved out of our island, and all the people that leave here that have an education paid for taxpayers, who built businesses with tax credits and things, are now paying their taxes on the continental United States. So we can't keep doing billion-dollar budgets, but until we get politicians in that reflect the needs of the voters, and that's the key word, the needs of the voters. Right now, the biggest group of voters on our island are 45 and under. They're job insecure, their housing insecure, and their food insecure. We need to vote in place politicians that will address these issues. I'm Ken Leon-Guerrero. This is my point of view, and I hope that everyone out here watching this video makes sure they're registered to vote and actually gets out their vote. Take advantage of the early voting. Let's get as many people through those voting lines as soon as possible so that we can eliminate the longer lines that we are hoping to see on election day. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll talk to you again next week, and maybe I'll go back to my original topic.